Hello and welcome to our journey in our discussion on the Ruthless Elimination of Hurry. We've been walking through the book, The Ruthless Elimination of Hurry by John Mark Comer. I'm joined by Joy Smith, Miriam Shumaker.
Hello.
And I'm Holly Smith. And we have been walking through, journeying and discussing the Ruthless Elimination of Hurry. We're on YouTube. If you're watching us on YouTube, go ahead and like the video. We always appreciate when you do that. Make sure to subscribe and ring the bell so you'll get notifications. And we're showing up every Friday at noon on MeWe.com. The page you're looking for is Today's Abundant Living with Holly Smith. So let's jump in. If you've been following along week by week with us, if you've been reading with us, this week we're talking about the secret of the easy yoke. So we talked about in previous weeks, we talked about the situation. Now we've moved into the solution. And so the solution, according to John Mark Comer, and I would strongly agree, is to take on the easy yoke.
Yeah.
He talks about apprenticing under Jesus, and a yoke, many of you probably know, but if you don't, a yoke goes over the neck of two, generally oxen, which ties them together so that they can work in the field together. And Jesus told us to take on his yoke, which was easy. And a yoke is described here as the way you shoulder a load. So we take on Jesus' yoke, and that's how we shoulder the load of this life. So, ladies.
Yeah, I like right when he starts off this particular chapter, I'm guessing you're reading this book not just because you feel hurried, but because to some degree you find the life of Jesus compelling.
Yes.
So, you know, it's, of course, he puts a little humor in it too. And he says, or if you're single and that boy or girl who gave you this book is compelling. Either way, I'm happy you've come along for the ride.
Right.
That's one of the things I enjoy about it. He throws in a lot of little humorous things in the book. It not only makes it for an easy read, but it makes it fun.
It does. Mm-hmm. Thoughts about this chapter? Thoughts about the easy yoke? I like this part. Go ahead.
No, go ahead.
On page 77, he says, the whole point of apprenticeship is to model all of your life after Jesus.
Yeah.
And in doing so, to recover your soul, to have the warped part of you put back into shape, to experience healing in the deepest parts of your being, to experience what Jesus called life to the full.
Mm-hmm.
I love that. We're not.
I love that idea too of apprenticeship, not just observing. You're learning and learning to do as he did.
Yes. Yes. And I like about, he talks about life to the full. You know, a lot of times I think there's this thought of I'm saved, I'm in, and then we just kind of bounce around in the chaos of this world, you know, until either we die or you know, the Lord comes again. And Jesus died for more than that. We are translated into the kingdom the minute we give our life to him, and we are to have a life in abundance. We should be really the healthiest, happiest, most joy-filled people on the earth. We're to be a light. So I really like that idea, that idea of life to the full, or life in abundance.
Right. Yeah, and it's interesting how he really teaches in here that to experience what Jesus called life to the full, what the New Testament writers called salvation, and how he equates salvation in the same Greek word as healing, that translates as healing. So salvation is healing.
Yes.
You know, it is a healing of our soul.
Yeah.
And you know, and I forgot about this sentence. Even the etymology of our English word salvation comes from the Latin salve.
Yeah.
So it's healing. It's a salve for your soul, you know, and that's why he talks about a light yoke, because it really doesn't have to be burdensome
Right.
at all.
Right.
Yeah.
Doesn't have to be, and really shouldn't be.
No.
It really shouldn't be. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. The Lord has a different life for us than clearly. And the further we go through time, and I don't know at what point we are in time, but clearly every day we're closer to the end of this system of things than we were yesterday.
Mhm.
And so we know biblically that this world is going to become more and more crazy, more and more chaotic. And
Mhm.
so we shouldn't be drifting, adrift on that river with everybody else. We should really be more and more, we should be appearing more and more different, have more and
Right.
more peace relative to, I mean, we should have the same amount of peace, but
Right.
relative to seeing the chaos, we should appear more different, more peace, more
Mhm.
joy, more life,
Mhm.
more
Yeah.
health.
Yeah.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
The
I
thing that
like
I
the
really,
go ahead.
go ahead, Miriam.
I like the paraphrasing of Matthew 11:28 through 30
Yes.
Yeah.
by Eugene Peterson. Are you tired, worn out? Come to me. Get
Mhm.
away with me, and you'll recover your whole life. I'll show you how to take a real rest. Walk with me and work with me. Watch how I do it. Learn the unforced rhythms of grace. I won't lay anything heavy or unfitting on you. Keep company with me, and you'll learn to live freely and lightly.
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah. And as you read the actual scripture of it, just before he does that paraphrase, um, I had mentioned earlier that I audiobooked this at the same time. And he literally, and as he read the two scriptures before, and he says, okay, let's read it one more time, even slower. He really reads it slow. And it was quite impactful when you're listening to somebody, doing what he's asked you to do in the book, and he's actually doing it. And then you read that paraphrase. It really had quite an impact on the way that particular Matthew 11. It was great. It was really makes you really think about it, and makes it way easier to understand than you normally would.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And it's such a well-known verse. I think it's easy to read through it and over it
Mhm.
without really, that is for us.
Mhm. Absolutely.
That promise is for us. Come to me, all you who are weary and burdened. That's
Right.
most of our culture. And I
Yeah.
will give you rest. Take my yoke upon you and learn from me, for I am gentle and humble in heart, and you will find rest for your souls. For my yoke is easy and my burden is light.
Yeah. Yeah, that really, what speaks, the last two lines in both, not only the actual scriptures or the paraphrase, keep company with me and you'll learn to live freely and lightly.
Yes.
That really speaks a lot to the argument against, traditional religions, specifically where we're not under this requirement of ritualistic, and it's about the relationship, and this is exactly what it's saying, is it's about the relationship, and that gives you the freedom to be free of those rules and regulations, for lack of a better word.
Yeah.
And it just really makes life a lot more enjoyable and a lot freer.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. It really does. I like too how he talks about the rhythms of grace, the
Yeah.
rhythms of grace. So we do pick up rhythms.
Mhm.
We pick up the rhythm of hurry. We can pick up the rhythm of grace. And
Mhm.
that's a supernatural thing. It's not something we have to do on our own. We have to submit into it. And again, we'll be talking about, he uses 4 disciplines he talks about. There's others, but he really goes into 4 that I have just barely tipped my toe into and have found them to be wonderful beyond words. Very refreshing, very renewing, very much helping me to move into these rhythms of grace. But it's a purposeful thing, and we do live in rhythms.
Mhm.
Mhm.
Yeah, for sure, good or bad.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep, exactly. I like, it says on page 80, Jesus' invitation is to take up his yoke, to travel through life at his side, learning from him how to shoulder the weight of life with ease, to step out of the burnout society to a life of soul rest.
Yeah, yeah.
Is so needed. And he later in this chapter talks about a lot of people are looking for an escape because this life is hard. I remember someone giving me a book once, way back in my early 20s. And the first chapter talked about life is hard. And I closed it up and I gave it back. I didn't want to hear that message.
Yeah.
And I read it, I don't know, maybe quite a few years later. And I thought it was one of the best books I ever read. But, you know, I was in a different place by then. And the thing is this life is hard.
Mhm.
This life is hard. We live in a broken world and this
Yeah.
life is hard. But our life doesn't have to be hard in the midst of it.
Right.
We can live in this soul rest and this peace and this joy. And not only can we, but that's what the Lord has for us. I mean, I think of a parent who has wonderful, beautiful life for their child and they don't walk in it, how heartbreaking.
Mhm.
You know,
Very
how
much.
heartbreaking it is. I mean, he has that for us and he wants to pour it over us and into us and he wants to equip us and will equip us for it. But we must step back into that place where we can receive it.
Yeah, for sure. That's the key, really, is you have to have that discipline to
Yeah.
walk in it.
Yeah.
Yeah. And he makes the comment that living life with Jesus does not bring an escape from all the troubles. We still are going to have trials, but living life with Jesus constantly gives us the equipment to go through them, to
Mhm.
get through them, to have that peace and that strength, and that endurance and the victory in the middle of the hard
Mhm.
situations.
Yeah. In somewhere, I don't remember it's in this chapter or another chapter. I'm not going to be able to probably get the wording just right until we get to it and I can actually read it. But he talks about, you know, we have the theology of Jesus, hopefully, but not always the lifestyle of Jesus. And so I think what happens is because we have the theology of Jesus, we know that we should, you know, pray in all circumstances. We should be thankful in all circumstances. We should have, you know, joy in trials. And so we try to muster that up from that place of theology. I know I should. If I was a good Christian, if I was a strong Christian, if I really had faith. And so
Yeah.
out of that place of theology, we try to muster that up, but it's not something we can muster. We should have the theology. He gave us his word so that we would have his word, but we must have his lifestyle. It's only by taking on his yoke. It's only by the working of the Holy Spirit and stepping into these disciplines that allow us the space to take on that yoke, allow us the space to walk with him, that we can have that life. And then it
Right.
does come easily. It's not a striving. It's a
Yeah.
striving to set the time, but it's not it's striving to achieve the life.
Well, and that's what his description and example that he brings up here about the runners. You know, people that are running, and you know, he lives in Portland, and he would watch these people get up at, you know, ungodly at times of the morning just to go out running, no matter what the weather is, no matter what, you know. And he says, when I run, I catch up on a podcast or stare off into space. But these people were, you know, just so. The reality was he wanted the life, but he's not willing to adopt the lifestyle around it or behind it. And that's true. I think, and he says, I think that's a lot of how we feel about Jesus. It's that, you know, you want that, you have the desire for it, but are you willing to make those drastic changes in your lifestyle to bring it in?
Right.
And I think we'll find that when we do that, all those things that we're kind of afraid of giving up or missing, those won't matter so much anymore. We'll find
Very true.
that the new life is so much more fulfilling and satisfying, peaceful.
Yeah.
Yes.
He
Yeah.
talks found at one point in the book too, these rhythms of grace as we move into these places, that they start to trickle out into the rest of our life. And I definitely found that to be true. And I've said, Jim and I have done, February of 01, we implemented the second discipline, which, spoiler alerts, is implementing, celebrating the Sabbath. And Jim speaks of it as a sacrifice. And it is. It's kind of like when we first are introduced to the principle of tithing. And, I've talked with people when they barely have 2 pennies to scrape together and tithe, but, God really blesses that effort. And so we set aside 24 hours, sundown Friday to sundown Saturday. And we do tend to have a very full calendar. And so we both work Monday through Friday. Sunday, we go to church. We did try doing a Sunday Sabbath, and we'll talk about that when we get to Sabbath, but we landed over on the Saturday Sabbath. But that's a big chunk of time. That's, when people cut their lawn, that's when we have a large garden in the summer. We have, that's when you tend to get things done. And so he speaks of that as a sacrifice. When we pray into Sabbath, a lot of times he'll talk about that. And he does say he wants to do it. It's worth it. He absolutely 100%, but he talks of it as a sacrifice.
Right.
Yeah. A purposeful sacrifice.
Yeah, he says there is a certain death, a giving up of some things in order to be able to follow Jesus. But on the other side of that is an empty tomb, a new portal to a fresh, freeing, satisfying, beyond explanation, joyful life.
Yes. And I think that's what it is a sacrifice, as Jim says, doing the Sabbath. But as we get to Sabbath, you'll hear me talk more about, for me, you've heard me talk about, that was February of 01, and I'll get into more details when we hit that place in our discussion, was things are getting pretty unhinged in my life. And that was a lifesaver, literally. I won't go into details now. I'll share when we get to that part, but literally it was like a life preserver that was thrown to me. Yeah, it's no doubt. It was the most insane time in my life to try to implement something like that, which of course is, how our God tends to, tends to do things. But, it wasn't too far out from it when I realized that, as usual, God knew exactly what he was doing.
Right.
Well, here's that quote. It is in this chapter. So this is Eugene Peterson. And it says, the Jesus way, wedded to the Jesus truth, brings about the Jesus life. But Jesus as the truth gets far more attention than Jesus is the way. And I love the word. I know, you do too. I love the word. I love to study his word. He gave to us. It's a beautiful gift to know his word, but he is the way. Right, for sure. Yeah. And the disciplines that are discussed in this book, he tells over and over again, these aren't his ideas. These are from the life of Jesus. These are the things that Jesus did. And Jesus was quite busy. Right. He had quite an important mission, but he was never hurried.
Right. And it goes back to the word apprentice. That's what this is all about, is learning how does he have all that busy lifestyle, but yet not be hurried.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely. There's another part. It says, but Jesus realizes that the most restful gift he can give the tired is a new way to carry life, a fresh way to bear responsibilities. This is an easy life is a myth. Life is hard. An easy life isn't an option. An easy yoke is.
And that's it. It's only an easy option if you make the choice to take that option.
Right.
I mean, otherwise, life isn't going to be easy, but you have to make a conscious effort. It's not just something that's going to just be thrown in your lap and say, oh, hey, here you go. Life is easy now. It
Yeah.
takes work, but it's a good work.
Yes, 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 and so worth it.
Mhm.
So
Yeah,
worth it.
right. Right.
Jim and I have been married 20 years now, and Sabbath was on my heart before we married. And shortly into our marriage, it was on our hearts together. And we had tried to implement a Sabbath and just feeble attempts. We just honestly didn't know what to do with it, what to do with ourselves, what the purpose was of it. You
Mhm.
know, like sitting around watching paint dry. What do you do? You know, we just couldn't seem to get it. We'd read what we could in the Bible. And that's one of the things I really like about this book is he gave with all four of the disciplines. I think he does a super nice job of cementing them in the scriptures, you know, so we understand where they come from, what the value is, what they're for, what they looked like it in Bible times, and how they apply today, and how we can, and he gives practical, and he tells you all the time, you don't have to do exactly what I do. You know, God will call you as he calls you, but he gives some good starting points, some good how-tos, some good, and actually at the end of the book, there's even, you can get a little pamphlet that we printed out, and it gives you some how-tos, which we started with. We've changed some of them, but I have found that immensely helpful.
Yeah.
And the style, the writing of the book too, just that it's a deep topic, but it's written in a light, super easy to follow away.
Right. Yeah, that's what I like about it, is that he just really makes it fun to read. You know, and then you look forward to the next, you know, segment or this next section.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I just love how he winds this particular chapter up in the last one of the last paragraphs. It says, this is why Jesus doesn't offer us an escape. He offers us something much better, equipment.
Yes.
You know, it's given you, you know, the equipment is there. You just have to get it.
Yes.
If that makes sense.
Yeah.
You know.
Yes. I like that too. And again, I like, you know, once we get into the disciplines that he shares, I like that these are really true spiritual Jesus apprentice tools, equipment, as he puts it. You know, with what I do, I give people ways to get unhurried, ways to relax, you know, have a structured bedtime and get plenty of rest. And those are valuable, but they're never going to go to the core.
No, right.
They're never, ever going to go to the core. You know, the core, until we're really have taken on that yoke, until we're really walking in his way, those are just, you know, Band-Aids, you know, put them on top of walking in his way. And now they become, you know, tools, additional tools to help us move in that direction.
Right.
But really to live a real life of peace, a real life of rest and joy, it really has to be abiding in him, that deep, deep abiding that comes in taking on his yoke.
Right. Right. Which again, it's an option. You just have to make that choice. I mean, that's how is it? An easy life isn't an option. That's a standard. That's a reality. But the easy yoke is an option, and that's something that you have to make the choice.
And again, it is an easy yoke. It's a simple choice, but it's not easy. I think there's a lot of people, believers who love the Lord, truly love the Lord, and you know, are devoted and are truly wanting to, you know, walk with him, but just haven't found their way to the easy yoke.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, anything more on the yoke?
No.
Okay. Well, our next week, we're going to be, what we're really talking about is a rule of life. And we're going to really start moving into now how to apply the principles in this book. And it's really life-giving. So I look forward to seeing you next week. Make sure to come join us.
Yeah.
So for now, be blessed, be well.
Okay, bye.
Bye-bye.